Kia ora everybody, happy to go straight to questions.
The IPCC report that's out today is pretty scary, and it doesn't mince its words on what governments around the world need to do. The He Waka Economic Plan, those final decisions were meant to be made earlier this year. It's now autumn. Why haven't those decisions already been made?
We're still working our way through a process on He Waka Economic. Obviously we want to try and keep the farming community, the rural community on side with the work that we are doing. We want to get something that's deliverable, something that's actually going to overall make a difference in terms of our targets. I'm still optimistic that we'll be able to achieve that.
But have they been bread and buttered under your Prime Ministership?
Well, it is a bread and butter issue in my view. So yes, tackling climate change has a major impact on our way of life and on the way we live. And so we are continuing to focus on it.
Greenpeace says He Waka Economic isn't actually worth the paper it's written on and should just be torn up, and they should go back to putting the agriculture under the ETS. Is that something that you intend to do?
Well, there is a backstop built into the ETS at the moment, which is if He Waka Economic does not deliver a viable alternative, then that's what will happen.
Is it a coincidence that Andrew Hipkins started working for the government and then you started dumping a lot of your alcohol policies?
It is an absolute coincidence in terms of the reprioritisation of the container deposit scheme that was already in train. In terms of the work around alcohol reform, we hadn't actually made decisions, in terms of what was going to progress and the speed with which different parts of that program were going to progress, and we now have.
Health Coalition Aotearoa, they're concerned about what's going on here. They believe it's appropriate that there should be a calling off to do so. Do you think that's what's needed?
Look, I'd never shut the door on those conversations. I'm not going to, rule them in, but I also wouldn't rule them out either. System, almost all of them have been found to have limitations, and in some cases one of the challenges there is trying to do things that specifically target lobbying can inadvertently target other people, seeking to democratically participate in the process of governing, and we don't want to have a chilling effect on that either. So I wouldn't take things off the table.
But at the moment there are no safeguards, right? One day he's working for the alcohol industry, the next day he's helping run your government.
Look, I'm absolutely confident that Andrew Curtin has left behind all of the lobbying work that he was doing. It was one of the conditions of him taking up the job that he had to discharge any remaining obligations that he had before he was able to take up the job, and I'm confident that he did that.
It doesn't help with perception issues though, does it? That short time frame, that would actually help alleviate some of the concern around it, because it is so close. You're in a lobbying role one day and the next, as you say, chief of staff.
Well, one of the challenges of recruiting in government as opposed to recruiting in opposition is that people are more likely to be going directly from one job to another, and so they don't have that. When a new government coming in, you'll often have staff who have been with you during a period of time in opposition. That's not the case when you're recruiting new people when you're in government. So whoever you recruit, they're most likely to have been in employment of some description. The key issue is how you manage any potential or perceived conflict. I'm absolutely confident that both, in terms of real and perception, we've been able to manage those.
So you can give an absolute
wouldn't something like a cooling off period actually help in that situation, because you actually start to set some rules around it when people have been working for vested interests and are very, very politically connected, and it's a direct political connection. It's not someone working out in the ether and then coming in.
Well, I guess one of the challenges is, in filling a job like Chief of Staff, you are going to be looking for people who do understand the system of government, who do have some history of it, and who can step into the job on day one and start working effectively on day one. And that is always going to be a challenge if you're changing midstream, so a new Prime Minister or an existing staff member leaves. That's always going to throw up a bit of a challenge in that regard. The key thing is making sure that any conflicts or perceptions of conflicts are carefully managed. I'm confident that we're doing that.
You can give an absolute guarantee that your Chief of Staff had absolutely no influence over the alcohol legislation that you've dropped.
That was a decision of the Cabinet. The Chief of Staff does not attend the Cabinet.
And just
are you going to review or change any lobbying rules whatsoever?
It's, like I said, not something I've said this morning. It's not something I have looked at this point, but I wouldn't rule out further change in that area in the future.
So you're not interested, you're just like giving a catch-all rubbery maybe?
No, I'm just not ruling it out. It hasn't been my number one issue in the last 8 weeks, but I wouldn't rule out change in the future.
Do you think the current lobbying arrangements are problematic, or do you see it as an issue, or do you think this is just how it's done?
I was relatively supportive. I think it was a Green Party bill that was brought before the House quite some time ago under the Key government. It ultimately got voted down by them. But I also saw some potential fishhooks in that. When we worked through it, there's a potential that you could have actually had a chilling effect on people legitimately participating in the democratic process. And so I think that's one of the things that we just have to make sure, any change in this area, that we work through it carefully so that people aren't actually discouraged from participating in democracy.
What is the message?
Just on Posey Parker, any update there?
I haven't got anything new for
So
you.
she's described immigration's review of her entry as absolutely Orwellian, and said her supporters aren't aggressive, it's the pro-trans supporters that are. Do you agree with that?
It sounds like the comment of someone who's just trying to get a headline.
Is there a case for ministerial intervention with her?
There's a process that has to work its way through. It starts with officials, and that's where it sits at the moment. I understand if there is a need for a ministerial decision, the Minister of Immigration will go to the Minister of Immigration. I'm not involved in that process. I haven't got any update from earlier this morning.
And what's your view? Should she be allowed in?
Look, as I said, I don't know all of the facts of the case. It's not a case that I'm going to involve myself in. I'm not a decision maker in the case, and I'll respect whatever outcome comes from that.
What is the message Minister Mahuta is taking to China?
That New Zealand's values our relationship with China, that we acknowledge that for the last couple of years we haven't been able to meet face-to-face in person because of the global pandemic. So this is our first very senior level ministerial visit to China since the end of the pandemic. And so it's a good opportunity for us to get back together, have a conversation. Obviously, all of the issues that you would expect will be on the table, including our trading relationship, which is very important to New Zealand. Some of the broader global issues, I'm sure, will be on the table as well, including just the overall environment that we're living in at the moment.
There's been a lot that's happened since 2019, any ministerial visits. Is there going to be any shift in position, any shift in approach or attitude from New Zealand as a result of the geopolitical events of the past years?
I think clearly we'll have a lot to talk about, but I'm not going to create a blow by blow. But I do expect that the war in Ukraine will come up. I do expect that the Pacific will come up, and I expect that we'll have good, robust conversations about those.
How comfortable are you in the foreign affairs space? I mean, it's quite a new portfolio for you. You're potentially going on some of these big trips, China possibly. What do you bring to it, and have you been looking and trying to, I suppose, learn a bit more in this area?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think anyone would be surprised to learn that when you step into the role of Prime Minister, there's a lot of new things that you need to get your head around very quickly. Foreign affairs isn't an area that I've been, had a previous involvement in a significant way, but I'm confident that I'm taking the time to make sure that I get things right in that area. I'm confident I'll be able to do a good job.
It's a nuanced
area.
Complex area.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to take New Zealand, its message, and I suppose do the diplomatic dance that is required at the moment?
Yes, absolutely.
When you take New Zealand,
absolutely. And this afternoon I've got my first phone conversation with Justin Trudeau, and there's a number of issues on the table with Canada at the moment that we need to work our way through, particularly in the trade space. And I'm confident that I can do that.
They've gone back on IPCC. It's called for governments to take radical action. Will your government take radical action?
What I've indicated since I became Prime Minister is that my focus is obviously on reducing New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions. I want to do that in the most effective way possible, and to some extent the reprioritisation work that you've seen is taking some things off the table that weren't going to be particularly effective, and that will allow us to focus more on the things that will actually make a difference.
The report has identified as methane is now the key to reducing emissions. Methane is agriculture. You've delayed He Waka Eke Noa decision, so how are you taking radical action?
We may have taken longer to make the decisions. We haven't delayed at this point the overall target in terms of when we're aiming to have a new system in place.
Prime Minister, we're back in the hut.
Yeah.
What do you consider hut values? What are your values?
Look, I think the hut where I grew up, and it's nice to be back here again, kind of represents a real cross-section of New Zealand. And this community, I think, also to some extent reflects a lot of the demographic change that's happened in New Zealand in my lifetime. So this community is perhaps a little more affluent than it was when I was growing up as a young person, a lot older than it was when I was growing up as a young person as well. So many of the people who were here when I was growing up, they're still here now, and many of them have retired. And so, you know, there's a bit of demographic change here. In terms of the question around values, I think one of the things that I guess have ingrained in my DNA from growing up in the hut, bearing in mind that the hut was kind of a bit of an industrial belt for New Zealand and when we were kids, is that, you know, hard work should bring reward. So a lot of the families that I grew up with, their parents worked really, really hard, as did mine, and they were able to create a better life for themselves and for their kids by doing that. I want to make sure that that degree of social mobility, that opportunity to work hard and get ahead, is still available to New Zealand families.
Now that cost of living is the #1 issue in New Zealand at the moment, do you think that growing up in Upper Hutt, living in Upper Hutt, gives you a unique ability and understanding of what people might be facing?
Look, I wouldn't profess to be able to speak on behalf of everybody, although I guess as Prime Minister by definition I've got to do that, but I think what it does give me is an ability to listen and an ability to relate to the day-to-day lives that other people are living, even if they're not necessarily the lives that I'm living right at the moment. I'll come to Ginny in a minute. Yeah.
Under your Prime Ministership, do you see value in diversifying our trade relationships more beyond China?
Absolutely. I think, look, any trading nation, as New Zealand is wise to make sure that we've got a diverse network of trading relationships. Under our government, you've seen real focus on that. So the CPTPP opened up huge opportunities for New Zealand exporters, as does our UK Free Trade Agreement, which we're in the final stages of, as does the European Union Free Trade Agreement, as does the work that we've done around in the ASEAN region. Also, you know, near neighbours and people who we trade with. And then, of course, we've got our very important trading relationship with Australia. So my message, I guess, to Kiwi exporters is, yes, we do want to make sure that you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, that you are diversifying. We do live in a globally uncertain world, and business needs to make sure they're taking heed of that.
Is our trade export currently diverse enough?
No, not at all.
Kurt Campbell was here on the weekend talking about AUKUS, talking about discussions, active discussions going on about New Zealand joining potentially some of those working groups. What are they, and what would the nature of any involvement in AUKUS be?
Yeah, I don't want to speculate on that while we're having continuing to have conversations. Probably just to reiterate the comments that I've been making already, which is that Australia, the UK, the US, they continue to be incredibly important security partners for us, as does Canada, who aren't part of the AUKUS arrangements. And we'll continue to work closely with those countries. In terms of the AUKUS arrangements, clearly there are some features of that we won't be part of. We won't be part of the nuclear-powered submarines arrangement. You know, we continue to be proudly nuclear-free, and we're aware that our Pacific neighbours are very committed to that as well.
At the heart, though, of the AUKUS deal, that deal is part, you know, at the heart of the pact. Do you think there might be some concern from New Zealand about us inching closer and actually being drawn into something like AUKUS, whether we kind of really want to or not, in a way?
As I've said, despite the fact that we might not agree with nuclear-powered vessels, the three partners to AUKUS still continue to be very important.
But we're Five Eyes partners, so yeah. What's the benefit? What would the benefit be of going into AUKUS?
Look, again, while we're having those conversations with them, I don't want to speculate on what might come out of those. But one of the bottom lines for us is that we're going to remain nuclear-free. That's not going to change.
Would that potentially be antagonistic to China as well, if we were to look to go into the AUKUS arrangement?
As I've said, I don't want to speculate on hypotheticals. We continue to speak with a broad range of international partners, as you would expect a country like New Zealand to do.
Was talking about it pretty openly at the weekend.
We will always put New Zealand's interests first in these conversations.
Would there be benefits to joining AUKUS, and what would they be?
As I've indicated, there's a pretty big stumbling block to us being involved in AUKUS as it's currently framed.
There are active discussions about New Zealand,
and that is that we're going to be nuclear free.
But he talked about active and ongoing discussions about New Zealand becoming involved with working groups.
Yeah, so and while we're having those conversations, I'm not going to provide a blow-by-blow commentary on them.
Just on a slightly different topic from AUKUS, now that the kids aren't here, can you reveal what you got sent to the principal's office for?
I really was trying to remember after that, and I honestly...
You expect the voting public
I expect the voting public to believe that I don't remember what I was sent to the principal's office for when I was 7 years old, but I do remember it happened twice.
Convenient.
Seems convenient.
You're leaving a vacuum.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'm sure you can all fill it as you generally do.
Can I ask some questions of Jenny?
Yes, Jenny, fire away.
Chris Hipkins said he would have preferred a more senior minister. How can you reassure him and others?
Well, first of all, I know it's a big job. I've worked in police for 10 years. I come from a policing family. I know the realities of the front line, and I'm committed to doing a good job.
And youth crime stats are out today. Is there really a big youth crime problem? And if so, what's your plan to tackle it?
My single focus will be improving community safety. I want New Zealanders to feel safe, and the two areas that I think we can do better on is retail crime and repeat youth offending.
But what is your plan to tackle those? Not just identifying them as the issues, but what's the actual plan?
I'm going to be continuing to work. I think New Zealanders need to feel safe, and I think we need to continue seeing reductions that we've seen in retail crime. And I'll be working closely with police to make sure we continue to do that.
Said that you talked last night and you laid out some of your priorities. Was that pretty much at community safety and retail crime, or did you go any more broadly about how you would approach the job?
The three main areas I talked to Chris about last night was community safety, and under that is retail crime and youth offending, and then the wider issue I'm keen on is reducing organised crime and gang activity.
So are they aligning with the Police Association's priorities? Did you...
He looked forward to talking in person. We had a brief chat on the phone, and we agreed to meet in person and have a more thorough discussion.
Given that you've worked for nearly 10 years with the police and you've got a bit of experience here, how do you feel personally about calls that you're not up to the job?
Look, I know it's a big job, and I know firsthand that policing is a tough job out there. So I'll be committed to demonstrating to New Zealand I'm working hard each day.
What do you think about that?
That your appointment is a signal that Labor is soft on crime?
I'm committed to improving community safety, and I'll be working every day to do that.
Do you think those messages that you might be soft on crime are a bit gender coded?
Look, I think that the priority is that New Zealanders feel safe, and I'm committed to improving that and to give Kiwis that sense of being safe in their homes.
What do you make of sentencing? Do you have opinions on whether it's tough enough?
Look, I think those issues are largely before the courts. My focus as Minister is making sure that we've got cops on the front line that are there and responding.
Will you be keen to keep down the prison population?
In terms of that, again, community safety is always the focus, and we need to make sure that our courts are working appropriately to do that.
Previously, Poto was binned because of the lost narrative on crime, so I don't refer to a narrative rather than the actual issues at stake. So how are you going to take up the fight to national when it comes to making sure people feel safe? By
focusing on community safety, and I know that there is shared across the House in improving community safety, I'd like to have that conversation.
You offender statistics out today, they show that fewer young people are receiving custodial sentences for serious offending these days. What do you make of that? And do you think that's good enough, given the concern that we've seen from retailers about ram raids and issues like that?
I've been really encouraged when I've met with retailers as Minister for Small Business. The rollout of fog cannons is going really well, and I think that gives those shop owners a sense of being safer, and that's what we need to be working on.
Shop owners are saying that they're still feeling incredibly vulnerable, that actually the support that they're not getting from the government, it's just not enough. So that's a very different message that we're hearing from the retail sector.
The two programs, one run by police and one by MB, that have been improving the retail response have been going really well. I've been encouraged, but yes, we still need to do more in that space.
Yeah, so you'd acknowledge that the rollout, as the Prime Minister has referenced in the past, has not gone particularly well. Are you saying at the moment they're going as well as they could?
The fog cannon rollout has gone incredibly well. We've had over 500 applications through already.
Yeah, but how many? You may have had that many applications. How many have actually been
they're done in a short period of time. So the way it works is they're issued a voucher immediately within 15 minutes online, and once they have that voucher, there are 18 providers working across the country to install it.
So you're happy with the current rollout rate?
The rates of the fog cannon rollout, yes, I'm happy with that.
And what do you make of that big decrease in the number of young offenders, serious offenders, getting those custody residential sentences?
I think it's always important to look at what the underlying causes of crime are, and I know police do a very good job of working with other partner agencies like Oranga Tamariki to help identify those high-level repeat offenders and make sure they're getting the support they need.
What specifically about your 10 years with the police do you think will your bring to the portfolio?
I worked in a range of areas in police. I worked both in gangs, methamphetamine. I worked across frontline and also in policy. I think having a good understanding of the mechanics of how police work, and also knowing what it's like for those men and women who put themselves out on the front line each day.
And do you have the police commissioner's phone number, and do you feel comfortable calling?
Yes and yes.
Is he a mate?
Is he a mate? Yeah. Do you like to chew the fat?
I'm a commissioner, and we meet regularly when we need to.
Just
Does
seriously on that,
the
mate.
Does the Prime Minister-
Auckland lockdown as being a big drive?
Funding has peaked after that, so there has been a range of things as a result of COVID. It is quite difficult to say and pinpoint what a particular thing has done on crime, so I wouldn't want to say exactly what the impact was.
Did the Prime Minister's got a call offering you the job? Did it come as a surprise?
I put my hand up well a long time ago. I've always wanted to do police. Community safety is a personal passion of mine, and I'm really proud to have his confidence to do this job.
What did you learn about methamphetamine, given your policy work on it, and the ongoing trouble New Zealand's had keeping it out?
The benefit of identifying a user versus a dealer and where to target.
Are you aware?
So, I mean, do you not think they should? You think they should be treated differently? At the moment, both get arrested.
So the police programs like Te Ara Oranga that's run in Northland has had a far greater effect when they've targeted dealers and not users. So if you stem the flow of where the methamphetamine is being distributed, you have a greater impact on the supply in that area.
Just like to see that rolled out further across the country.
I think it's an effective program in that area, and I'm always open to seeing advice on how we can improve.
Just throwing it forward, obviously crime's going to be a big issue coming up to the election, but also the spotlight will be on you because of how the previous minister has exited the portfolio. What do you think of being under that spotlight? Do you think it's fair?
Look, I take the job incredibly seriously. I'm proud to have worked within police in the past, and I'm going to take the skills I learned and apply them every day in this job.
So do you think you're going to be under more scrutiny than perhaps other ministers, given the circumstances?
It won't change how I approach this job.
What do you think of the soft on crime, tough on crime narrative?
Sorry, didn't
What
catch
do
that.
you think of the soft on crime, tough on crime narratives?
I focus on community safety and making Kiwis feel safe, and I think that's where the focus will be lying for me.
But do you use those terms? Do you ascribe to using, do you like using the term tough on crime, soft on crime, or do you think they're not worth using?
Look, they're always interesting as in part of a political narrative going on in law and order, but I think community safety is a priority, and I think that's what New Zealanders are wanting to see.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Pie time.
Time for a pie.